Good morning, everyone. I happen to be in Aurora, Colorado today, attending the National Association of Counties. I expect you might remember the name of Aurora today. Aurora is where there was a horrible shooting. Today's I think the 5th year anniversary. I mention that because it's all over the news, and to my surprise, I'm in that same city. So have a thought for all of those folks who got through that and the ones who've already suffered. So that's just a little bit off the agenda, so apologize for that. So I'd like to ask Elaine Freeman, Commissioner Freeman, to lead us in the pledge. So please stand if you can.
Place your hand over your heart to salute the greatest nation. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So let me have a roll call. Ms. Beltran.
Commissioner Bill de la Pena.
Present.
Commissioner Freeman.
Here.
Commissioner Parks.
Here.
Commissioner Parvin.
Here.
Commissioner Richards.
Here.
Commissioner Rooney.
Here.
Chair Ramirez.
Yes, I'm here. Thank
Alternate
you.
Commissioner Zaragoza.
Okay.
Here.
So, okay, thank you all for being here. This is the time when we do an agenda review. So we would consider and approve by a vote, a majority vote, any revisions or accepting the agenda as presented. Any commissioner have any comments, questions, proposals for the agenda?
I have a question regarding 9 item. I'd like to pull that and make my comment.
Okay, so we'll pull item 9, which is budget to actual reports for May and June. And then other than that, any other commissioners have comments? Seeing none, let's have a motion to accept the agenda. We have pulled item 9, however.
So moved.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. We need a roll call, Ms. Beltran?
Yes. Commissioner Bill de la Pena.
Yes.
Commissioner Freeman.
Yes.
Commissioner Parks.
Yes.
Commissioner Parvin.
Yes.
Commissioner Richards.
Yes.
Commissioner Rooney.
Yes.
Chair Ramirez.
Yes. Did you call Commissioner Zaragoza?
He's
He usually comes after me. I see. Yes.
Commissioner Zaragoza is an alternate today.
Oh,
I'm an alternate.
okay.
I'm still.
Thank you very much. Thank you for that. Okay. All right, so let's have a discussion. Do I have feedback? Are you getting feedback from me?
We can hear you just fine.
Okay, I heard myself repeated. So let's discuss. So Commissioner Richards, Vice Chair Richards.
Yes, regarding the item for the budget 2021-2022, under expenditures 1107, terminations, parens, buy downs. On May 31st, it looks like there was none, but on the June budget, the 1107 terminations, parens, buy downs, I'm not sure what that is, and it looks like there was quite a bit of an expenditure at that point in time. Could Kai explain what that is?
Certainly, Commissioner Richards. The termination buy down refers to a benefit that's provided to county employees in which employees under the management resolution can cash out vacation for pay every year. So that reflects that one of the staff members did cash out some of their vacation.
The term terminations, it was confusing to me. Is that something is left over from previous budget?
That's how the county characterizes it. Yeah, it's explained in the budget. We go into a little bit of an explanation on what it actually is in each of the budget messages, but there's not enough room here to reflect the whole thing on the budget actual sheets.
On the expenditure explanations, I apparently didn't get that page on the expenditures. It starts out with, well, there's a hole punched in it. 2033 is the first number account identification. Was there supposed to be a sheet for expenditures? An explanation sheet?
Yes, there should be there. Thank you for pointing that out. We will make sure that the sheet is complete for the next staff report.
Very good. Thank you, Kai.
Okay, so are there other questions from commissioners on this budget item?
Chair Ramirez, a point of order. We were at number 5 and then jumped to the consent item. Do we want to have public comment now?
You're correct, but let's go ahead and, I'm sorry about that. I don't have a paper copy and I scrolled too far ahead. So for consistency, let's vote on item 9 and then we'll go back to, unless we have public comment, Ms. Beltran.
We do not have any public comments.
Okay, so let's just go ahead and vote on item 9, which is budget to actual, and then I'll ask for public comment. Thank you, Commissioner Rooney, for pointing that out. Is there a motion for item 9, budget to actual?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. So we have Commissioner Parvin and then Vice Chair Richards seconded. So let's vote.
Commissioner Bill De La Pena,
Yes.
Commissioner Freeman,
Yes.
Commissioner Parks,
Yes.
Commissioner Parvin,
Yes.
Commissioner Richards,
Yes.
Commissioner Rooney,
Yes.
Chair Ramirez.
Yes. So let's return to item 5, which is public comment. This is an opportunity for members of the public to address the commission on any subject matter within the commission's jurisdiction. And let's see if we have anyone who'd like to speak, either remotely or in the boardroom. Ms. Beltran?
We have nobody wishing to speak.
Thank you very much. So with that, let's then go to our first item for public hearing. That's item 12, 2022 Lafco Conflict of Interest Code, which requests the recommended action is to authorize executive officer to sign 2022 local agency biennial notice stating that no amendments are necessary to the current conflict of interest code and transmit it to the clerk of the board of supervisors. So, Mr. Loma, can you report on this?
Yes, thank
This
you.
is another point of order, if I might. I believe that we just voted on the budget, but not the entire consent. Am I right on that?
That is correct. We'll need a vote on the remainder of the consent items.
Oh. Okay, I am sorry. I thought we did vote. I apologize. I guess we just vote on the revision. Okay.
I'll be happy to
I-
move the rest of consent item.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Apologies, everybody. We need a roll call.
Commissioner Bill De La Pena,
Yes.
Commissioner Freeman,
Yes.
Commissioner Parks,
Yes.
Commissioner Parvin,
Yes.
Commissioner Richards,
Yes.
Commissioner Rooney,
Yes.
and Chair Ramirez.
Yes. Okay, let me see if I can keep us on the straight path here. So let's go back to item 12, public hearing matter, and you heard me speak about what it is, the Lafco Conflict of Interest Code.
Okay, thank you,
Mr.
Chair.
Loma?
Thank you, Chair Ramirez. Yeah, this is just the biannual review of the Conflict of Interest Code. The government code does require that the commission review this every 2 years. We are not recommending any changes or amendments to it, so the recommendation is that the commission authorize the executive officer to sign the 2022 local agency biannual notice stating that no amendments are necessary. Thank you.
Any commissioner have a question about this? This is a public hearing, so do we have any members of the public who wish to speak on this item?
Nobody wishing to speak.
Thank you. All right, I guess I've opened the public hearing. I'll go close it now and ask for a motion.
Move approval.
That's
Second.
Commissioner- Thank you. Vice Chair Richard seconded, so let's vote.
Commissioner Bill De La Pena,
Yes.
Commissioner Freeman,
Yes.
Commissioner Parks,
Yeah.
Commissioner Parvin,
Yes.
Commissioner Richards,
Yes.
Commissioner Rooney,
Yes.
and Chair Ramirez.
Yes, thank you. Now we'll go to action items. Item 13, amendment to Ventura Lafco Commissioner's Handbook related to disadvantaged unincorporated communities. Mr. Loma, would you report on that?
Yes, thank you again, Chair Ramirez. So as used to, I'll wait here till the presentation loads. Okay, this is agenda item number 13. It's regarding recommended amendments to the Lafco Commissioner's Handbook regarding disadvantaged unincorporated communities, or DUCs. So how does LAFCO law define a DUC? Well, Government Code Section 56033.5 provides that a DUC means an inhabited territory, which is defined as 12 or more registered voters, that constitutes all or a portion of a disadvantaged community as defined by Section 79505.5 of the Water Code. The Section 79505.5 of the Water Code defines a disadvantaged community to mean a community with an annual median household income that is less than 80% of the statewide annual median household income. Therefore, for LAFCO purposes, a DUC is a community with 12 or more registered voters where the annual median household income is less than 80% of that statewide. So LAFCO has to consider the existence of DUCs in several actions that come before it. For instance, regarding municipal service review determinations, the commission must consider the location and characteristics of any disadvantaged unincorporated communities within or contiguous to the sphere of influence of that agency for which the MSR is prepared. Regarding sphere of influence update determinations, the commission must consider the present and probable need for those public facilities or services, referring to sewer, water, and fire protection, of any disadvantaged unincorporated communities within the existing sphere of influence. Regarding city annexations, DUC considerations apply to city annexations of territory abutting a DUC, and this is provided for specifically for city annexations in Government Code Section 56375A8. So this section of the Government Code regarding city annexations became effective back in 2012. And it provides that, A, except in for those changes of organization or reorganization authorized under that section that refers to unincorporated islands, and except as provided for in subparagraph B below, a commission shall not approve an annexation to a city of any territory greater than 10 acres or as determined by commission policy, so there's some discretion there about that 10 acres, where there exists a disadvantaged unincorporated community that is contiguous to the area of the proposed annexation, unless an application to annex the disadvantaged unincorporated community to the subject city has been filed with the executive officer. Now, B provides some exceptions to that. An application to annex a contiguous duct shall not be required if either of the following apply: that there was a prior application for annexation of that disadvantaged community in the preceding 5 years, or the commission finds, based upon written evidence, that a majority of the residents within that duct are opposed to the annexation. So that was the government code in 2012. Now, in response to that new government code, the commission adopted a policy, and this is found in section 3.2.5. And I won't read all of this, but that first paragraph basically just recites what a definition of a duck is for Lafco purposes. And then it states that Nyland Acres and the community of Saticoy, both of these communities meet the definitions of a duck. So this is the formal recognition of, by the commission, of the ducks that are located in Ventura County. And it's this recognition of these two ducks that we've used as the basis for making the previous determinations regarding municipal service reviews and spheres of influence. Now, that second full paragraph, that just recites the exceptions. But I also want to point out that in the second sentence there, Lafco will not approve a proposal for an annexation from a city involving territory greater than 28 acres. Now, as you recall, the requirement in the what the legislation says is that it's 10 acres, but the commission does have discretion to change that 10 acres, which the commission did later that year in 2012 at the request of the city of Ventura. So the city of Ventura was pursuing a residential annexation next to the community of Saticoy, and they did not want that annexation to trigger the requirement to annex Saticoy. So the commission agreed to increase that threshold to 28 acres so that annexation wouldn't trigger this policy.
Madam
So that-
Chair,
Commissioner Zaragoza.
the question I have, Kai, for example, Nyland Acres, it's a duck and it's contiguous to Oxnard. Do they have to vote to be annexed to the city of Oxnard?
Well, what would happen under this policy now is that if there is a proposal to annex into the city of Oxnard property that abuts Nyland Acres, that's 28 acres or more, then there also has to be an application to annex Nyland Acres to the city of Oxnard, unless either of these exemptions can apply. So it doesn't require that
Because we
Nyland
have-
Acres, just that Nyland Acres be annexed. It only gets triggered when there's an annexation proposal that abuts Nyland
Oh,
Acres.
I see. Yeah, because Ventura Boulevard, is abuts, Nyland Acres there on Highway 101,
Right,
Okay,
right. And I'll touch on that here briefly in just a moment.
thank you.
Okay, so
Okay.
fast forward to 2020. There was some amendments to Government Code Section 56375A8 regarding the annexations of ducts. And those amendments are shown here in bold font and underlined. So the effect of these amendments is, well, the first one, you'll see smaller was inserted after the 10 acres or smaller. What this ended up doing was removing the commission's discretion to adopt policies that increases the 10-acre threshold to anything above 10 acres. The commission does have the discretion to reduce that threshold to below 10 acres, but it cannot be above 10 acres. Then there were some clarifying changes, the addition of unincorporated. But then you'll see at the bottom there, a subdivision C was added, and it provides that this paragraph shall also apply to the annexation of two or more contiguous areas that take place within 5 years of each other and that are individually less than 10 acres, but cumulatively more than 10 acres. So alternate Commissioner Zaragoza, this speaks a little bit to your point that under this new provision, if there are multiple annexations along Ventura, is it Ventura Road or Ventura Boulevard in Nyland Acres, if within 5 years, multiple annexations add up to 10 acres, then there also must be an application submitted to annex Nyland Acres.
And that would also be to Callegas too, and not just a city, right?
I couldn't hear that, I'm sorry.
Also, that would include the annexation to Callegas Water District.
Yes,
And also the city.
yes, very true,
Yeah.
very true.
And by the way, I'm not advocating that we annex the 9 acres. I just, I want to know because we talked about it several years ago.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Sure. And then earlier this year, the California Association of Lafcos released a map, a statewide map of disadvantaged unincorporated communities. Now, Cal Lafco prepares this map every 5 years, and they do this as a resource to Lafcos. And what that map did, and the methodology in preparing that map was attached to your staff report, but it identifies the following ducks in Ventura County. So it reaffirms Satakoy as a duck and Island Acres as a duck, but it also identified Piru as a duck, and that is not reflected in the commission's policies. So as a result of these changes and as a result of the new duck map, the current handbook policy on ducks predates the 2020 changes to state law. So as a result, the 28-acre threshold is no longer consistent with the law. And the policy does not reflect the new language regarding the multiple annexations that exceed the 10-acre threshold. And it does not identify Piru as a duck. So to resolve these inconsistencies and just bring the commission's policies up to date, we're recommending 2 changes. So the first would be the addition of Chapter 6 to the commission, to Division 2 of the commission's policies regarding operational policies. And what Section 2.6.1 does, it devotes an entire section to the acknowledgement of what the commission considers to be ducks in the county. So the red underlined is new language. The black text is text that we're recommending be relocated from the commission's current policy in section 3.2.5 and relocated here to a new section 2.6.1. We include a reference for purposes of this policy, for purposes of ducks, we reference the certain sections of the government code where they apply, and of course to section 3.2.5, which applies. And then we add Piru as one of the recognized ducks of the commission. So all of the black language already exists in the policies. It's just going to be relocated to this new section. And regarding section 3.2.5, this policy applies only to city annexations, and then of course to ducks that abut a city. So here it's reflected the text that's relocated to 2.6.1. And we are recommending, of course, that the 28-acre threshold be reduced to 10 acres. That will bring it consistent with state law. We reference, where necessary, the ducks identified in the new section 2.6.1. We make some clarifying changes, but then we also add there at the bottom language that reflects the additional language that was approved in the government code. So with that, the recommendation is that the commission adopt a resolution to amend the handbook to add section 2.61 and amend section 3.2.5, and then waive a second meeting for consideration of the policy amendment and resolution pursuant to the handbook. And I'd be happy to answer any questions if you have them.
Commissioner Rooney?
Thank you, Chair Ramirez. I know that with the ducks that they need to be identified in the city's general plan and have an analysis of what it would take to annex in. So I'm wondering, does the Lafco handbook outline that the cities need to have that as listed in their general plan as well?
No, that requirement is found in general plan law. So it's a requirement that the cities have to follow. It's not a requirement that Lafco be involved in that.
The Lafco doesn't review the general plans of the cities as part of the MSRs or anything?
We do generally speaking, we review all changes to general plans. And the only cities that would have to abide by this are the city of Oxnard and the city of Ventura. And as far as we know, when these laws were first adopted, they did amend their general plans. I believe the housing element might have been part of that. But as far as we could tell, they were consistent with the requirements in state law.
Okay.
Do you have more, Commissioner Rooney?
No, it's just that I was thinking back to a meeting that we had about 4 years ago with Commissioner Zaragoza, then supervisor, talking about the City of Oxnard general plan. So we can talk offline about that.
Okay. Vice Chair Richards.
Yes, Kai, in your text that identifies the Piru central area of the Ventura County's area plan for Piru, does that not include a lot of commercial properties? And I'm not that familiar with the Piru area plan, but the central area is pretty limited. Why was only the central area chosen?
The central area includes the developed community, and only there's the Piru area plan is really large and extends well beyond what is commonly identified as the community of Piru. However, in that area plan, they further differentiate, specify the developed area within Piru, and that's what we're considering to be the community of Piru. You'll notice similar language is in the description of Nineland Acres. It's the developed community generally, identified in the county's area plan. So we used similar language to rely on the county's area plan to identify.
Area.
It is on that central area. There's a map.
Great, thank you very much.
Other commissioners have questions? I have a question, just thinking outside the language here. Are there circumstances where a city could be forced to annex? Okay.
No, I would say no. Under these provisions, the city could be forced to submit an application as part of another annexation. That's abutting, say, Satakoy or Nineland Acres. But aside from that, the commission does not have the authority to require that either city pursue annexation of these ducts.
Okay, thank you. Other commissioners? Is there any public comment on this matter?
We have nobody wishing to speak on this item.
Thank you. So what's the pleasure of the commissioners?
Move approval of staff recommendation to adopt the change.
I'll second.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second. Let's have a vote.
Commissioner Bill de la Pena,
Yes.
Commissioner Freeman,
Yes.
Commissioner Parks,
Yes.
Commissioner Parvin,
Yes.
Commissioner Richards,
Yes,
Commissioner Rooney,
Yes.
and Chair Ramirez.
Yes, thank you. So now we'll go to item 14, which is 2022 Cal Lafco Achievement Award nominations. Kai, do you want to present on this?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. So this year, the Cal Lafco Conference is scheduled to take place in October, and the Cal Lafco Board will announce nominations and winners for all of these different award categories. So the nomination period is open right now for these different categories, which are found on page 86. There looks like there's 8 different categories there. And if the commission would like to consider nominations for any of these categories, staff would handle that and make the nominations to Cal Lafco.
Commissioners, any suggestions? I have a couple. Once again, I'd like to nominate Andrea Osdi, who does so much great work for us, for the Lafco Professional Award. And I'd like to see if I can get some comments from the commissioners about that. That would be my request, that we nominate her.
well, I'd be glad to second that. I think she's doing outstanding work, so appreciate it.
Okay, so that's one recommendation. The other recommendation I have is that we propose the work on the Bell Canyon MSR, which was complicated and long and a lot of discussion. But I do think it was good work. So I'd like to recommend that as well.
I think there's a lot of lessons to be learned.
I'm on that support 3 kids.
Oops. Commissioner Parks?
Yeah, I was just saying, I think there's a lot of lessons to be learned with Bell Canyon that other LAFCOs throughout the state of California could look at. It's kind of a textbook case of, what LAFCO does in terms of requiring and essentially following LAFCO law and ensuring the safety as well as compliance with the regulations that are on the books. So I like that because it was so in depth in terms of the many issues that they have there. That I certainly haven't seen that in my years, to see so many different procedures and requirements that were so loosely and dealt with by the community. And I think it was a learning experience for them too. So it says a lot about what LAFCO is supposed to be doing. And I agree with that. And I also think Andrea would be an excellent choice for recommending. Her professionalism has just been outstanding, as has our LAFCO staff.
Other commissioners?
I would agree with nomination for Ms. Osdi. I'm not going to vote in favor of the Bell Canyon MSR. I think that there's too much in the background that I can't support moving that forward as an award.
Okay, other commissioners? All right, so we have.
Excuse me,
Yeah.
I would go along with what Marianne just said.
Okay. All right, so so anyway, I'm going to move let's do them two separately. Do any other commissioner have any comments? Any member of the public?
We have nobody wishing to speak.
Okay. I will then, I do believe there's a lot of things we could learn, good and bad, about the Bell Canyon situation, but I am going to support that. Let's see how the full commission goes. But let's first go to the nomination of Andrea Osdi for the LAFCO professional. So I'll make that motion, and I think somebody seconded.
I'd be glad to say.
Okay, so let's vote on that. If we need a vote.
Commissioner Bill de la Pena,
Yes, an enthusiastic yes. Thank you.
Commissioner Freeman,
Yes.
Commissioner Parks,
Yes.
Commissioner Parvin,
Yes.
Commissioner Richards,
Yes.
Commissioner Rooney,
Yes.
and Chair Ramirez.
Yes. Okay, and then the second recommendation is the actual MSR for Bell Canyon. I'd personally like to know if any other LAFCOs kind of dealt with that situation. So I'll recommend it. Is there a second?
Can I ask what the time frame is on this? Because I think just writing it up would be educational, to have it written up as a nominee. Is it possible that we could have that written up and take a look at it before submitting?
The nominations are due August 12th. Yeah.
Okay.
So if the
We're not-
commission,
Well, we wouldn't have that chance.
right.
Now, I'll support the motion. Like I said, surely on an educational as to what LAFCO can and can't do, and then just the myriad of different exceptions that they were making to our laws. It's just, I think it is remarkable and educational. and also understanding there is a straight and narrow. And having that spelled out to me is part of that educational thing for other other LAFCOs, but other special districts in this case, to see that there is these requirements and what an extraordinary amount of staff effort has to be put towards something that you think of as rather routine. And in this case, it certainly was not. Yeah, I definitely will second that.
Thank you. Other commissioners' comments on this? I recognize we don't all agree about that. So let's, I got a second, I think, a first and a second. So let's proceed to a vote unless a commissioner has any comment. Any other?
I mean, I
comment?
guess, this has been a contentious issue, and I think that reasonable minds can disagree on specifics on it. I think that the records that have come out following the decision that was made by our commission told a lot of different stories. And I don't think they were all very positive to how everyone behaved in this manner. And I think that it's not something that when you put it all together, and see everything, I don't think it's something that we should be proud about and send it in for an award for our board. When it was very contentious and there's still a lot of questions surrounding it. So I'm not going to support this.
Got it. Any other commission?
Let me just add to that. I think it's not resolved yet. And for that reason is why I can't support it, because it's really not resolved.
Okay.
Is it coming back to a vote? I thought we've passed it unanimously.
The MSR was,
How could it not?
yeah, the commission accepted the MSR unanimously. The thing that's not resolved is any action, future action on the sphere of influence.
Yes.
Commissioner Richards, it looks like you want to speak. I can't really tell.
I'll throw my comments in. It seems like it's still up in the air with regards to the final disposition of what actions are going to be taken by the folks at Bell Canyon. It seems a little premature to make a recommendation on an award without having everything completely resolved. So possibly next year would be a better opportunity to identify that. So those are just my comments.
Okay, well, I see, let's just vote and get it done and then go forward to the next item. So we voted for Andrea to be nominated. Thank you very much. So let's get a vote on the MSR recommendation for an award.
I'm sorry, could you repeat the mover and the seconder, please?
It was myself. I recommended it. I made the motion. Commissioner Parks made the second.
Commissioner De La Pena?
Yes.
Commissioner Freeman?
No.
Commissioner Parks?
Yes.
Commissioner Parvin?
No.
Commissioner Richards?
No.
Commissioner Rooney?
No.
Chair Ramirez?
Yes. Well, I see we didn't get that passed, but I do think there's a lot of, it's a case study and I guess we won't be finished with it yet. Thank you very much. Okay, let's go on to the next item, which is the discussion. Oops, where did I go? My agenda. Item 15, presentation of Public Records Act request. I asked our legal counsel to have this discussion so that, Mr. Boada, you're present, correct?
Yes, I am.
Just to clarify questions that have been raised.
Yes, thank you, Chair Ramirez. Good morning, and good morning, Commissioners. Yes, and just by way of additional explanation and background, LAFCO has not typically received many or even any Public Records Act requests. There's been some activity in that regard recently, which has raised some questions with regard to how staff responds to those requests, and so I was asked to give this overview. So here, just to provide an outline of what I intend to cover today in the presentation. It will begin with a brief discussion of the Public Records Act. I know that most, if not all, of the commissioners are familiar with the law, so I won't spend a lot of time on it, but we'll touch on a few key points. Also talk a little bit about what are public records in LAFCO's files. I know that seems self-evident, but not everything in LAFCO's files is a public record, so I'll talk a little bit about that. And then just because something is a public record does not mean that LAFCO is required to disclose that to the public, and so I'll talk specifically with regard to those exemptions that would apply to LAFCO files. I'll then talk about the process that staff goes through in responding to requests under the Public Records Act, and then focus on the issue of records that are located on personal devices. This has been a challenge to not just LAFCO, but all public agencies, just because of the changing technology and the increased use of personal devices to conduct public business. And then finally, I'll talk about the resources that are available to LAFCO staff in responding to requests when they do come in. So beginning with the Public Records Act itself, I note here that it was adopted in 1968, and the reason is that when this first became law, it was fairly easy to identify public records and produce those in response to requests. They were on hard copies located in a physical file. That, of course, has changed tremendously over the years with the advances in computer technology. The Public Records Act has not always kept up with those changes in technology, and so, again, this is not a LAFCO-specific issue, but that's created challenges to public agencies throughout California in being able to locate and produce public records. I note here that the Public Records Act is currently found beginning at Section 6250 of the Government Code. That will change as of January 1. The legislature decided last year to recodify the act, so it now will be located at Government Code Section 7920. And that was done because the law had been amended so many times over the years that it became quite confusing. There's a lot of decimal points in the code sections within this chapter of the Government Code, and whenever you see that, you know that the law has undergone many amendments. And so to make it easier for the public to locate the specific provisions, the code sections will be changed as of January 1. I noted here Proposition 59, which was approved back in 2004, which made the right of access to public records a constitutional right under the state constitution, and provides that the provisions of the Public Records Act are to be broadly construed in favor of public access, and any limitations on the right of access to be narrowly construed. And although the courts had already interpreted the Public Records Act that way, this constitutional provision ensured that no subsequent court could offer a different approach to interpretation. So As far as the provisions of the Public Records Act itself, it starts out with this broad declaration that access to information concerning the conduct of the people's business is a fundamental and necessary right of every person in this state. And this creates a presumptive right of access to any record created or maintained by a public agency that relates in any way to the business of the public agency. And it's that last provision there about relating to the business of the agency that generally determines whether something, although it's located in the Lafco's file, is a public record, and this is of particular importance with regard to that issue of personal devices that I mentioned. And then finally, the Act provides that every record must be disclosed unless a statutory exemption is shown. A couple other points with regard to public records requests is that the purpose of the request is irrelevant to whether or not the record needs to be provided. So generally speaking, staff cannot ask why the record is being requested and can't discriminate depending on who the identity of the party is or what purpose they're seeking the record, including, as noted here, if it's for the purposes of bringing suit against the agency. So the Public Records Act defines what is a public record broadly. And as you see here, any writing containing information relating to the conduct of the people's business or the public's business, prepared, owned, used, or retained, and I inserted Lafco here, regardless of physical form or characteristics. So with regard to that relation to the conduct of the public's business, as I noted, not every record, just because it's in a Lafco file, is a public record. And just to give you an example, this didn't involve Lafco. This was a public records request that I handled on behalf of the county, but it kind of, although it's kind of a silly example, it was recent, so it came to mind. There was a request for various communications which required a search of emails and instant messages sent on the county system, and one of the records that was caught by this search was somebody's grocery list. So that, of course, wouldn't be a public record, would not need to be handed over. But more seriously, and this was noted in a recent California Supreme Court case that involved a request for records on personal devices, what the court noted there in ruling that just because something was located on a public official's personal cell phone or laptop or notebook did not necessarily mean it was not a public record. The court had, and I'll just read from the opinion, made this observation, which is the ease and immediacy of electronic communications has encouraged a commonplace tendency to share fleeting thoughts and random bits of information with varying degrees of import, often to broad audiences. As a result, the line between an official communication and an electronic aside is now sometimes blurred. And I'll talk a little bit more later about how the court has balanced that the competing concerns of the public officials' privacy with regard to their personal devices and the conducting of public business on those personal devices. And the last point here, kind of to emphasize this idea that emails or text messages sent on personal devices can still be public records, is that they are so regardless of the physical form and characteristic of the communication or the writing. So as I noted earlier, not all public records need to be disclosed. The legislature has identified certain specific exemptions. These are set forth in the Public Records Act, or they've been created by case law. The burden in all cases would be on Lafco to demonstrate that the exemption applies. And the examples that I've listed here include preliminary drafts, and the code section actually says that a preliminary draft is not a public record only if it's not kept in the ordinary course of the agency's business. And this becomes an issue, again, because of the nature of electronic records. Draft documents are often sent and received via email and are not necessarily deleted, although there is no intent to actually preserve those drafts. But when requests do come in, the search for emails tends to pull up those preliminary drafts. And so the guidance that we typically give to staff is to, if there is no purpose for preserving those preliminary drafts, to delete them permanently from the system. Otherwise, there is a potential that they could be subject to the Public Records Act. The second example I listed here is the deliberative process privilege. This is not in the Public Records Act, but was established by case law and actually extends beyond Public Records Act requests. And this privilege would also apply to an attempt, for example, to question a commissioner as to the reasons why they approved a particular action. And our office has been involved in litigation where we've objected to those requests and have yet to have a court rule that that inquiry can go forward. The next example I listed here is this public interest catch-all exemptions. So this applies to any exemption that's not based on a specific statutory provision in the Public Records Act, of which there are many, but I would also say those many exceptions are very specific, and most of them would not apply to Lafco records. But beyond that, this public interest exemption requires Lafco to prove that the public interest in withholding the record greatly exceeds any public interest in disclosure. And again, as noted earlier, that the burden would be on Lafco to demonstrate that public interest in non-disclosure. And finally, the example here that we've generally asserted is any disclosure prohibited by federal or state law, and this would of course apply to any privileged communications between Lafco counsel and staff or commissioners, and then any information that would be otherwise confidential or protected by privacy laws, or where Lafco had agreed to keep any information submitted confidential. So as far as the process itself, and this is set forth in the Public Records Act, it's 2 steps. When the request comes in, it's evaluated by staff in consultation with my office, and a determination is made as to whether the request seeks public records that are subject to disclosure and that are in Lafco's possession. And then the second step is if there are any non-exempt records, that they are produced to the requesting party. With regard to step 1, there's a 10-day deadline from receipt of the request to make this determination, and this is typically referred to as a determination letter, which advises the requesting party whether or not Lafco has any disclosable records. That 10-day deadline can be extended for unusual circumstances, and those are defined under the Public Records Act as such things as the need to search through a large volume of records or to consult with another agency that may have joint ownership or control of those records. So once the determination is made, Lafco is required to advise the requesting party when the records will be available. It's important to note, and this is a misconception that I know in dealing with the county staff under the Public Records Act, that there's a deadline to actually produce the records within the 10 days. That is not the case. There is no specific deadline under the Public Records Act for when the records need to be produced. It provides only that they be made promptly available and that Lafco not delay or obstruct the inspection or copying of records. And the second step is, of course, to make the records available. And again, this can be complicated depending on if they're electronic records and the requesting party wants them produced in a particular format. But generally speaking, this is pretty straightforward once the determination has been made as to the existence of those records and whether or not any of them are exempt from disclosure. So, as I noted at the beginning, I was going to speak a little bit about this issue of public records that are located on personal devices. And the last word, at least for the time being, is this California Supreme Court decision from 2017, where the issue was that the city refused to ask its public officials to search their personal cell phones or other devices and took the position that those are not public records merely because they are located on non-government cellular or other devices. And the Supreme Court rejected that argument and pronounced that documents otherwise meeting the definition of public records do not lose this status because they're located in an employee's personal account. But at the same time, the court acknowledged this privacy issue and the challenge of searching for public records that are located on a public official's personal cell phone or other device, and came up with this rule that to qualify as a public record, the writing must contain information relating to the conduct of the public's business. And so what that did is created the task of searching the phone or other device for those records and determining whether or not any of them are public records. And so the question was raised of, well, how do you do that and who conducts that search? And there's, of course, a very real privacy concern in handing over somebody's personal cell phone to have someone search it for what might be public records. And so the court developed this two-step process, the first step being to communicate the request to the official employee in question. But then importantly, the second step allows Lafco and other public agencies to rely on these officials or employees to search their own personal files, accounts, and devices for responsive records. And as the court explained, that they This approach strikes the right balance between the concerns or the competing concerns of government transparency and the privacy interests of the individual who may have those records. So the last thing with regard to the handling of these requests, there are various resources available to LAFCO staff as particular issues come up. The Attorney General's office has published guidelines for access to public records. The League of California Cities has also a very useful guide to responding to Public Records Act requests. And then finally, the County of Ventura has guidelines. And these are primarily what LAFCO staff uses to respond to Public Records Act requests. Since LAFCO is staffed by the county, this is generally the approach or the guidelines that are used in responding to those requests.
Questions?
So that completes my
So-
presentation. I'm available for any questions.
Thank you very much. Do commissioners have questions? Anyone?
Questions?
Commissioner Rooney, was that
Thank
you?
Yeah, sorry, thank you. So, Mr. Bawada, just on your last comment that you made there that LAFCO is staffed by the county, who did you mean by that?
Well, LAFCO staff, the executive officer and his staff, and county council serves as LAFCO council.
But my understanding is that Kai and Andrea and Rochelle are not county employees, right? They're LAFCO employees.
They're county employees who provide service to LAFCO under a contract between LAFCO and the county, is my understanding.
That's news to me. Kai, can you clarify?
That is correct. We are county employees under contractual agreement to serve as LAFCO staff.
Okay. Wow. Okay. So that's new. That's new to my understanding, was that you were indeed LAFCO employees. Goes back to my original comment years ago about the closeness of LAFCO and the county and how that all plays into decisions. Okay. A couple of questions that I have is, number one, could we please add the PowerPoint presentation that you just made and include those to the minutes last time? Chair Ramirez, could you ask for that inclusion?
Of course. Thank you.
Thank
Yes, of course.
Thank you. And do we have anything in our handbook right now that talks about the process for public records requests?
There is nothing in the handbook speaking to public records requests.
Chair Ramirez, could we ask that there be an item placed in the handbook that talks about the process for public records requests in order to have a fair and transparent process for anybody who's interested?
I don't know how to get things from the commission to the handbook. Kai, could you explain, or Mr. Bawada?
The commission could direct staff to develop policies to come back for the commission's consideration.
Okay, well, I think that might be appropriate. Do you have more questions, Commissioner Rooney?
I have just a couple more.
I
So,
want to recognize Commissioner Richards in a minute. Okay, go ahead.
The next question I have is, does LAFCO, when LAFCO receives a public records request act, what's the process when you receive a request? Do you notify the commission? Do you notify the chair? Do you not notify anybody? I'm just interested in what the process is and how you obtain it, record it, keep it, fulfill it, things like that.
Did you want to respond?
We just kind of follow the process that was outlined by Mr. Boada.
But I guess my question is, do you keep a file of public records requests that you receive over time?
Once the
Or do you
records,
fill it and not keep anything after that?
once it's fulfilled, we consider the matter closed and it just goes into a general file. We don't follow up on it. We don't track it. We just consider the matter closed.
So you do keep the request in some sort of file?
Yes.
Okay. So when you receive it, what happens, at that point? Do you notify the commission or what?
Well, we notify legal counsel, and we discuss it with legal counsel on the best, most appropriate way to respond to it to comply with the Public Records Act requests. And then when we typically, our practice is to let the commission know that we received it, and we either have fulfilled it or are working on fulfilling it.
So your practice is to notify the commission after legal counsel has received it?
Yes.
Is that
Generally
correct?
speaking, yes.
Okay, so just to clarify that one, so the records request comes in, you forward it to legal counsel, and then you notify the commission. Is that accurate?
Well, we work on fulfilling the request. We notify the commission typically in the next update memo that we received it. If it's been fulfilled, we'll indicate that to the commission. If it hasn't been fulfilled and we're still working on it, we'll let the commission know. And that's staff's
Okay, thank you.
practice. That's not a policy. That's not written down anywhere. That's just information for the commission that we deem important that they know.
Yeah, I guess that would be part of the thing I think would be important to put in our handbook is what the practice is for the staff as well. My last question is, we've had some requests recently where the council has provided guidance to the commission and saying, okay, and help in fulfilling the response there. So I'm wondering, does that happen with every public records request, or is it just sometimes that the council is engaged to help fulfill the Public Records Request Act? Thank you.
Are you referring to legal counsel?
Yes.
It depends on the scope of the public records request. If the public records request is just for records that we have in the Lafco files that are readily available to Lafco staff, then a legal counsel is not involved. However, if there is a request for emails or text messages or other records that are not in the possession of Lafco staff, then legal counsel will usually take over and request those records and or work with IT services to search email accounts, that sort of thing. So in that case, like what happened recently, Mr. Bovado will get involved, legal counsel will get involved to seek those files.
So your comment, and I can't remember the exact word, but it may have been usually, but there's not a standard practice for every public records request that comes in that the council helps the person requested for that. Is that correct?
It's whoever has access or can gain access to the records is the one that requests those records. So I don't have access to the county email system. However, legal counsel can have access to the county's email system. So it stands to reason that Lafco legal counsel would pursue those records.
So sometimes council helps the request to identify the request for the person that's being requested, and sometimes they don't.
Yes,
fair to say?
I mean, generally speaking, yes. If legal counsel is not necessary to obtain the records, then he's not involved in obtaining the records. He will often review the records before they're sent out, whether he obtained them or not.
And if I,
Okay, thank you.
well, and if I may just add to that, our office would typically get involved if there's a question about whether any record that has been requested is exempt. If there's no question that it's a public record and not exempt, then there's no need for our office to be consulted on that. But there's also the issue of email searches, which Kai mentioned, which our office would be involved in that just to oversee the process.
Commissioner Rooney, more? If not, I'll go on to Vice Chair Richards.
Thank you. This question for Mr. Boda. Are items that are marked confidential or proprietary information, are they exempt from the Public Records Act request?
I would say the mere marking of a document as proprietary or confidential does not in itself make it exempt, but the contents of it, if they meet the standards of a trade secret or other level of confidentiality, would then make the record exempt.
And who would make that determination?
Well, that could be a
Is that
staff. That could be a staff determination. It could be a determination by my office, or it could be a determination of the author of the document. And I don't know specifically if this is a Lafco issue, but certainly at the county, documents are submitted with the understanding that they will be kept confidential. But that understanding alone is not a sufficient basis to withhold disclosure. There has to be a legal basis for the confidentiality. But there have been times where we've left it to the party claiming the confidentiality to object to disclosure. And that there's a case involving against the county right now involving that very issue, where the county has taken no position as to whether or not the document is actually confidential, but the proponent of that position is litigating the issue in court.
All right, thank you very much.
I have, other commissioners have questions, comments? I have a couple questions. If I could, the deliberative process, just going a little bit beyond public records, Mr. Boddick, can a person such as a member of this commission or member of the board be asked about their reasons in a public records request for making a certain decision? That's not necessarily a public and written down somewhere, but you said deliberative process.
They can be asked for that information. They are not required to disclose it. Now, one point that about the Public Records Act with regard to exemptions from disclosure, these are not mandatory. Lafco could choose to disclose an otherwise exempt document if it chose to do so, but it is not required to produce those records. And so likewise, a commissioner cannot be required to disclose the reasons why he or she made a particular decision.
Okay, and earlier the question about who employs are Lafco employees county employees or not? Is that the same thing as the Air Pollution Control District? Are they county employees, if you know?
To my knowledge, they are also county employees that staff the APCD.
Okay. My communication or any commissioner's communication with each other on Lafco business is subject to public records request?
Potentially, yes. If they involve Lafco business, they would be public records.
So many times over my just a year and a half tenure as a member of the board, I've gotten many requests from your office, not you specifically, but county council, to review my emails, personal and county email, for any record any discussion of a particular item. And I know that the county counsel's office has access to the means to look at county email, and then it's up to me to do a good job of looking at my personal emails. I try to keep it separate, but it's very difficult. And I have to turn them over, and then the county counsel's office makes a determination of whether or not they're subject to disclosure. And that's pretty typical. Other commissioners, questions, comments?
Comment.
Yes.
Hearing that, I realize that our Lafco employees are, their payroll comes through the county. Services are provided from the county, but it was my understanding that they are an independent organization. We are an independent organization, and we do the hiring of this organization, not the county. So I think today I'm a little bit surprised by hearing what I heard. I mean, all these years, I've been on Lafco a very long time. And all that time, I believed that we were, a separate independent organization from the county. So I would like to get more clarification on that, since this is my interpretation of it for all these years. I understand that payroll goes through the county, and that's probably what the contract is with the county, is that we are an independent organization, but we use the services of the county for payroll services, copy machines, and telecom and things like that. But it's very interesting to hear that description today, because I was taken back by that. That I think it should be independent from the county. That's my comment.
And if I may.
Do you think we are independent, but we use these services for payroll, et cetera, even using the boardroom, for example, today? And county council, I believe we pay, LAFCO pays county council, correct? Comes out of our budget?
Yes, correct. And Commissioner Parvin, your understanding is correct. LAFCO is an entirely independent, functioning as a state agency. However, under the 2000 agreement with the county, the commission receives certain services from the county and absolutely pays for those. So ultimately, even though we are county employees under contract, the commission has ultimate say over how many employees are staffed, how many, the pay for the employees, et cetera. That's under the original agreement from 2000.
Okay, that was my understanding, and it sure didn't sound like that when it was being described. So appreciate the clarification.
You're welcome.
Other commissioners?
Can I
Any
just
other-
take that question one step further? I'm sorry. So hypothetically, if the commission wanted to make a change in staff, what happens to that staff? Are they terminated, or do they go back as a county employee in some other position? I'm not clear on that. You know what I'm saying? Can you hear me?
Yes, I'm just wondering if we're getting off topic a little bit too much regarding.
I think we may be, and yeah, so.
The commissions acts independently regarding staff, that staff have certain rights as county employees. I think I would just leave it there. Yeah, so if we want to have a discussion about that, perhaps that can be another future agenda item. Commissioner Freeman. Commissioner Parvin, you're frozen, but you're looking good, even though you're frozen. Any other commissioners have questions about that? I don't know if it's my internet. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, so alternate Commissioner Zaragoza, you have your hand up. But we can't see you or hear you.
Regarding the retention of employees from LAFCO and so forth, to me, I think that would be an HR question for, for the commission.
Okay,
Just for
perhaps
permission,
I could,
to get clarity on
yeah.
that. Thank you.
Okay, all right. Other commissioners, questions on this topic?
Just as if I could, Chair Ramirez, and thank you for asking for this item to be placed on the agenda. I appreciate your efforts in that. So what I heard is that you directed staff to add the PowerPoint presentation to the minutes of this LAFCO meeting, and then
Correct.
have something drafted to place in our handbook regarding the Public Records Request Act. Is that accurate?
Well, I would with the consensus of the commissioners, and I'd ask that it be handled in conjunction with our county council and make it as concise and as clear as possible without creating lots and lots of paperwork or effort. I think the commission's heard a really good presentation. Thank you, Mr. Boada, for presenting. And I would like to see, do other commissioners agree with that? Creating a understandable, clear, simple policy on public records. Commissioner Richards, Vice Chair Richards.
It would seem like at the present time that the benchmark is the county guidelines. Is it not easier just to identify the adoption of the county guidelines for Public Records Act requests instead of trying to create our own?
That sounds simple. Mr. Boada, could you comment on that?
The commission could certainly amend the commissioner's handbook to incorporate the county guidelines as LAFCO's policy for responding to Public Records Act requests.
Chair?
Commissioner Rooney?
Along those lines, I mean, I still would like to see what the practice, the procedures for LAFCO staff to address that. I have no problem adopting the county policy on that, just to be fair and transparent with the public. I think that we should have it, in our handbook. It doesn't have to be lengthy or anything. The conversation today wasn't lengthy about that process. So I'd like that to be incorporated into the staff direction. Thank you.
Oh, okay, I don't have any qualms about that. So again, making it simple, proposing to adopt the county policies and being clear on procedure. Would that be the consensus? I don't know that we have to, do we have to vote on this? This is a receive and file matter.
I'll move that we receive the item and staff has some direction to come back from our discussion.
Is there a second to that?
I'll second that.
Any other commissioner comments?
I would just note that Commissioner Rooney did a Public Records Act request on me. I've never had a fellow board member or committee member ever do a Public Records Act request on a board member, which had to be made known to me. So that was important, though there was some concerns I hear that it was made known. But what I think is kind of the fact that my response was do one on her, with her communications with Bill Canyon, because that was the issue. I haven't received at all. I mean, it's been months. So I think maybe one of those things is we need to be have an honest effort to respond when we're asked.
Well, that's incorrect, because you have received 2 production statements here. And I think this is off topic from the public records.
It is on topic in the sense that there's still more that we're waiting for. We keep hearing Port Hueneme going to be providing. That was my.
You got it Monday. You got it Monday.
With a note that even more is coming. That's a fact. I will be glad to share that. But I think part of that is that we all have to be honest and forthright, and, we have public record acts done on us, we have to be responsive. That's just a standard thing.
Agreed.
Okay, all right. Well, let's,
So just to clarify, Carmen, I just want to make sure that that embedded in this Public Records Request Act was direction to staff to work on it, because I've been through this hoop before where it wasn't specifically directing staff to do it. So are you indeed directing staff?
yes, so with the consensus of the commissioners, asking staff to bring it back as a presentation that we would then, I hope, adopt and put into the Commissioner's Handbook, and that staff will work with County Council, WADA, to do those two things. Okay? So I think we had a motion and a second to receive and file, and staff has been provided direction.
Commissioner Villarreal Pena,
Yes.
Commissioner Freeman, Commissioner Freeman,
She's-
Yes.
Commissioner
Okay, good.
Parks,
I think that was me, and I'll say yes.
Commissioner Parvin,
Yes.
Commissioner Richards,
Yes.
Commissioner Rooney,
Yes.
and Chair Ramirez.
Yes, thank you. So, thank you, everybody. Good discussion. Let's go to item 16. Mr. Loma?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have nothing to add for the Executive Officer's report beyond the staff report of anticipated future items. I do want to note that in August, there are no scheduled regular meetings for the commission. So the next LAFCO meeting is scheduled for September 21st. So thank you.
Thank you. Go on to item 17. Do we have to receive and file that? Okay, that was informational. So item 17, Executive Officer's Report on Anticipated Future Agenda Items.
Yeah, and I'm sorry, that's what I was referring to.
Okay, so we do need a motion to receive and file, I believe. Is there a motion?
I don't believe
I'll
it. Okay.
Like motion.
So we do, it says receive and file.
I'll move that we receive and file the executive officer's report.
Okay, that was clear. Is there a second?
Second.
The comments are getting a little garbled for me. I don't know why. So let's just, I think we had a motion from Commissioner Parks. There was a second from Vice Chair Richards, correct? And let's just vote on that.
Commissioner Villarreal Pena,
Yes.
Commissioner Freeman,
Yes.
Commissioner Parks,
Yes.
Commissioner Parvin,
Yes.
Commissioner Richards,
Yes.
Commissioner Rooney,
Yes.
and Chair Ramirez.
Yes, the last item here is commissioner comments. Any commissioner have any comments to make at this point?
The only comment I would make is I really appreciate John Saragosa's comments with regards to items that are being on the agenda. I think his depth of knowledge with regards to the process and that from my point is very appreciative. I've only been on the LAFCO Commission for a relatively short time period, but I do appreciate John's insight to a lot of things. So thank you, John.
I agree. Other comments from commissioners?
Madam Chair, thank you again and appreciate that and have a happy summer.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Better hurry, it's almost over. Seems that way. Anything else from any other commissioner? With that, I want to thank staff for their presentation, Mr. Boada, for your help here, and everybody go out and be safe and stay cool. We're adjourned. Thank you.
Thank Thank
All
you.
right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all.